Today we took a drawing from one of my students, Pablo Lattes, who is a cabinet maker who happens also to work at the UN, the United Nations. And we are going to show Pablo, here's Pablo's original drawing, and we're going to take it to this point. And the video itself is going to take a while, but once you get these skills down, you're going to be able to do this yourself in about 10 or 15 minutes. And by the way, you can download the line drawing that we're using in the link below. So go ahead and pause the video and load that up if you want to draw along with us. I think it should be a lot of fun. And I'll go slowly. It's a little longer than most of my videos, but I think it's worth it for this one, especially for those of you that want to see new ways to be using Procreate to take your whole game to the next level. So Pablo, here is your drawing, and this is the way I've turned this into a JPEG so we can work with it. And during this exercise, everybody, in addition to Pablo, what we're going to do is basically take Pablo's sketch. We're going to make it black and white first, and then we're going to convert it to this smaller sketch here. And that's because I want to put it in the context of the room that it's going into for Pablo's client. And then what we'll do is we'll add a little context, and let's see, I'll move this over here so we can see all this. We'll add context to it. We're going to add a back wall color. We're going to add the main color of the main cabinet itself. We'll add a drawer color, an accent of drawer color. We'll add wood grain to that, and I'll make this a little bigger as we see it. And then we're going to add in these other smaller details, the different contrasting colors for the insets of the doors. We'll add these tiny little red dots. And then to make it fit in a little bit better into this room, we'll add some lamps on top of it. I'll show you a quick way to draw those lamps. And then we're going to add a painting just to situate it there in this room. And then we're going to do the most fun thing, which is we're going to add a lighting study to this. I call this a twilight layer. We'll add a lighting study to that, and I'll show you how we do all that. And then at the very end, stick around because it's going to be the most fun part. We're going to add these shadows that kind of bring the whole thing alive. So you can see it's got a lot of life to it, but you're going to learn some skills. The video is going to take maybe 10 minutes or more, 10 or 15 minutes, but you're going to learn skills, and when you get good at them, you'll be able to do all of this, believe it or not, in about 5 to 10 minutes at most. So that's our goal today, and let's get right into it. Now, I took my picture off the screen so we can get more detail, and our first step is just to import that drawing. So I'm going to go back into the import button to my iCloud drive, and I have saved Pablo's drawing as a Pablo Lattes sideboard JPEG, and I'm going to bring that in, okay? And in this particular case, I wanted to take the color out of Pablo's drawing just so we could do a more complete from the ground up job. So I'll do that first. I'll show you here is the single layer that Pablo's on. And I'm going to move fast, but any of these details I'll be happy to explain to anybody later who asks in the comment section. So now I know I'm on that layer, and I'm going to go into the selection tool and automatic mode, okay? And I'm going to tap on each of these layers. I'll start with the brown, and when I tap, I move it immediately left or right, and that feathers the selection. And I'll go all the way. Notice it's turned that brown the opposite of the brown to indicate that it's selected. I'll do a 3-finger swipe, and over here you can see cut and paste. And I'll tap that, and that puts that brown all by itself on its own layer. If I tap and hold that check mark, you can see it's on its own layer. And now I'll go back and I'll do the same thing with this interior panel. I'll switch back to that panel. I'll go to the selection tool, automatic. I'll just put it right over there and sort of make sure that you can see these edges coming. I'll pull it all the way across, make sure it's getting pretty much everything. It won't matter. We don't have to be too precise. And I'll go back to the 3-finger swipe, cut and paste, and now that has also been taken onto its own layer. And the last thing I'll do is I'll just go back to that layer and do the same thing and claim with automatic on. I'll claim these individual reds here. And they're going to be a little trickier, so I'll blow them up and you can see what's happening. I tap it. It teaches itself. After your first selection, it teaches itself. So you should only have to tap once. And I'll tap that. And remember, I have not turned off these other color layers. That's why you still see them. So there, all of those reds are selected now. I'll do the 3-finger swipe. I'll go to cut and paste again. And now those reds are on their own layer, okay? So with luck, that'll leave me with just this. I'll turn these layers off. And that leaves me with just the line drawing, okay? So I'll do a 2-finger pinch, and we go back to full size, okay? So in our class, we always teach to keep the line drawing on top of everything else, and then have the colors behind it so everything comes through. But I have to do one more trick here. Notice that if I turn these colors back on, well, you are seeing them. I wanted to make sure that this line drawing, always turn your line drawing to multiply blend mode, and then you're guaranteed that anything underneath that's the slightest bit darker will come through that line drawing, okay? So here's our basic setup, the setup I always use for color. A line drawing on top, and then we've got some colors already simply because Pablo created them already. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build these colors up from the ground up. But before I do that, I'm going to shrink down this image a little bit because Pablo has asked for some quick tips to help him sell this drawing to his client. And it's a little bare bones right now, and that's because Pablo doesn't have a lot of time. He's very busy. And so what I'll do is I'll just show you how you can select all of these together at the same time. Notice that the drawing layer is already selected. I'm just going to do a quick left to right swipe on these other 3 layers. That selects them in the secondary way. Now I don't have to group them, I can, but I'm not going to group them. I'm just going to come back to the Move and Transform tool now, and notice the whole thing is selected. And I'm going to bring that in. I've got Uniform selected down here, and I'm just going to shrink this entire cabinet down. And I'm going to eyeball this, but I want to shrink that cabinet down like we showed in the preview of this exercise so that it's roughly in the middle of the screen, and that looks good. I'll go from here to here, and that's right in the middle. And I also want it to be, I'm going to add a wall that's about 8 feet tall, so I want to make sure the cabinet is small enough that if this cabinet is, say, 42 inches, then 8 feet will be up here somewhere. I'm not trying to be precise. I'm just trying to do a very quick image. So I'll go ahead and tap out. And let's, since this is going to be part of the line drawing, let's add a color. We'll start way down at the bottom of the layer stack, and we're going to add a background color for that wall. So I'm going to pick just an innocuous gray, a slightly warm gray. And I'm going to come over here to the selection tool, and I'm going to make sure it's in rectangular selection. And I'm going to just pull across somewhere as big in my mind as I want this background wall to be. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to pull up and over to the other side. And I'm just going to, in my mind, balance those out so it's roughly symmetrical. I'm going to release, and now I'm going to tap and hold and pull that background color behind the drawing, okay? Now remember, the background color is behind everything, so these things are still in front of it, and that's okay. Notice one mistake I seem to have made is that I pulled that background color into the drawing that had the little red dots. And that's sort of technically a mistake. I wouldn't do it that way again, but let's keep going because that's a simple enough thing to fix, okay? So next is I want to put a background color behind all of this shape of this sideboard. So the main solid color that we're going to work against, I'm going to put there. So I'll add a color, and I'm working from large to small. I'm working from the wall through to the piece in the largest possible steps. And I'm going to make that background color the same color as Pablo has made his door here, okay? So to sample the color, I'm going to come in here, and I can turn off this selection, by the way. I'm going to come into the brush library just to activate the brushes. Then I'm going to go over here to the brush eyedropper, the color eyedropper. And when I do that, I'm going to pull that eyedropper over, and I'm going to drop it on this lighter color. That pre-selects the color, okay? And now remember, I'm on a new layer, so I'm going to go into the selection tool in freehand mode, and I'm going to select the entire profile of this piece of furniture. And there are some tricks where you get too close. Sometimes your selection will jump to a place you don't want it to be. So to be safe, I like to start right in the middle of a long stretch. So I'll start right here and just tap. And then I'm going to tap all the way around this. I'm going to work quick, and it may not be beautiful, but I want to really impress upon everybody that these are quick methods, okay? And notice that sometimes I tap and snap on a vertex, and other times I trace the vertex around, and it lets you do both of those in freehand selection mode. So I'll come around, I'm a little off there, but it doesn't matter. I'll come back up and get this last bracket. Remember, this is all about quick, because we've got that client waiting for this, and we really got to get moving. So I'll use that same, what I call the drag and drop color technique. I'll just tap lightly on this and immediately pull it over and release it. So there's my whole background color, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and make this part of the door that Pablo already had join this color, and the goal being that I want to be sure that when I change this color, if I do later on, if the client wants a different color or if I change my mind, I want all the same colors to be on the same layer. So I'll tap in this layer, and when I tap again, you'll see the pop-up menu, and I'll go down here to merge down, and that joins those two layers just like that, okay? So now let's do the same and select this. Let's make sure we copy the same door idea over here, but I'm going to take this a step further. I'm actually going to make most of this cabinet this darker, what I call a walnut color, okay? And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm going to go first to the brush menu just to activate it, not to choose a brush, just to activate brush mode. Then I'll go to the eyedropper. And what I'm going to do is I'll tap anywhere on the screen. Well, I still have to get that color first. So let me tap anywhere on the screen to make that drop-down menu go away. I'll sample this color. Notice that it appears up there. And now it's loaded. I'll go back to, I'll double check that I'm on a new layer. And in this case, I want to be on that same layer as that brown so that everything's together. I'll go back to the selection tool. And this time I'm going to just select the drawer fronts and these rails and stiles of this door. Because I'm going to make it slightly decorative. Pablo has not asked me to, but I'm just going to try and make this a little more fun for everybody involved. So I could do this again, just tapping in freehand mode, but I can also switch, even midstream, and switch to rectangle mode, and that'll make these go a lot faster. So I'll just stretch those rectangles right over these drawer fronts. I'm not worried if I go a little bit over. I'm just going for speed and spontaneity. Okay. And now I'm going to go up here. Now I can use the same trick here, but just assemble it in 4 pieces, okay? Or I could obviously do the freehand mode if I want to, but I like hacking Procreate for maximum speed, okay? So all of that's selected, and now I'm going to pull this dot in, but watch what happens when I pull it in. It only fills one spot at a time because of those masking marching ants that are involved. So I'm going to double tap, or rather I'm going to single tap with 2 fingers, go back to that original state where it's all selected and waiting to be filled. And now I'm going to go into the menu itself, the layer menu, and I'm going to tap here on the layer itself, and I'm going to go up here to fill layer. And it doesn't mean it's going to fill the whole layer, it just means it's going to fill everything that had been selected on that layer, okay? So here's where we are so far. Not bad. And now here's a good example. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to pick up these little brackets in the brown. So let's do that very quickly. And this will be good practice for muscle memory again. I want to be in the selection. I'll go back to freehand. I've still got that brown color selected. So I'll start tapping my way around. I'll start in the corner so there's none of that jumping when the lines close. In the corner, zip around. And from time to time I may quote go quiet because I may speed up the lesson, but I do want to make this, as I said in the intro, I do want this to be a draw along for anyone who wants to. And of course by now you've got the JPEG downloaded to your iCloud drive and to your iPad. So hopefully you're working along with us. And here we go. We'll finish this up. So I really love that precision that you get with the freehand mode. And I'll go up here again, and I'm still in the darker walnut color. And even though that's already in there, I can once more go back and go to fill layer and watch what happens when I tap fill layer. All of those last details fill in, okay? So let's see where we are. Let's tap anywhere on the screen to make the menu go away. I'll do a 2-finger snap, and we'll take stock of where we are so far. Let me now just quickly add back in those reds. I'll make them on a new layer because, again, all of these, each color we add, we want to be able to adjust later on, and it really is an exciting thing. So I'll go, I'm in disk mode right now. I'm going to go back over here to palette mode, and just coincidentally, I've got some crazy reds that I've used on different projects, okay? Maybe this, let's go with this brighter red, that's good. And I think here I'll just save myself some time. You can go into your inking or sketching. I guess for the rest of you, if you haven't ever downloaded my brushes, which are the architect brushes, just go in here and grab the round brush, okay? And select that. Then adjust its size over here. Build this up, and we'll just quickly throw that red in there, just like we're using a magic marker or a felt tip pen, okay? And if it's too bright, don't worry, because we're going to be able to come back and adjust all of these colors, all right? And notice here I've got gaps. I'm really not too worried about it. But if I were, I could come in here. Remember, I could go back. If I hold a little bit longer than normal on this, it'll turn back to the previous color used. I can go up to the rectangular selection. And this is just to show off a little bit how much more precise you can get. I'll come in here, stretch it across, tap, fill, layer, and watch what happens here. That fills that little extra gap in. But as I said, I'm really not worried about the gaps. I want to keep this fresh and fast, okay? Now, one of the great strengths of Procreate is the ability to adjust these colors, and I want to put some wood grain on these, but before I do that, I'm just going to ever so slightly adjust a couple of these colors to make them a little more similar to the vision that I have in my mind, even though it's not Pablo's. And so I'll come over here to the Adjustments menu this time, and I'm going to go to Hue, Saturation, and Brightness. And remember, I'm in the darker walnut layer. I'm going to go to Hue, Saturation, and Brightness. And I'm just going to play around a little bit with these sliders and try and find something that, yeah, that's a little better for a walnut. It's just a little more gray, a little more brown. And I can increase this, but I want to keep it fairly dark. So I'll stop there. And then I'll do the same in this layer of the lighter color. It's a little pink to me, and so I'm going to come back up. I've got that layer selected. I'll come back up. And this is one of the number one skills that all of you designers are going to want out there. And I'm going to try and make this more like, I would say like a light oak, okay? And a little less saturated, and that's not bad, okay? And then the last thing is maybe I'll turn those red dots into something more of a gold or something like that. Let's take one last chance, and you'll all get some practice at this most vital of skills. And it's a little hard to figure out where I'm at, but if I lighten it, and maybe I'll pretend it's like a gold or a brass, okay? And that's the beginning of a gold or brass. It's not perfect, but let's keep it, and I want maybe a little more contrasting color. So let's stop there. And that gives us some good practice at this whole retro adjustment of colors. I'll do a 2-finger pinch again to get back and give us the big picture. And let's now throw, before we get to any more details, because I want to put those lamps in and that painting to really bring this alive. But let's do the wood grain on this cabinet, okay? So it looks flat right now. And again, this video is meant to be all about things that you can do, quick things you can do. So I'm going to go into this layer, and now I'm going to select this layer from internally from the layer menu. So I tap it again, and I tap select, and what it does is it goes back to all that brown and masks out everything else, okay? So now my wood grain, when I apply wood grain, it's going to stay within the shapes of those drawers, and it's going to save me a lot of time. But I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to add a layer. And notice that the selection is intact, which is great. And I'm going to go up here, and this is really a question of experimentation amongst all of you. But I'm going to go into my Architect's brush set, and I'm going to go to one of my favorite brushes for doing wood texture, and that's the flowing hair brush, okay? And notice that same brown is picked, okay? So if I put that brown over there, it's just going to disappear. I'll come over, I'll show you what I mean. I'll adjust this slider, and I'll paint in here, and barely anything happens. Actually, I think I might have a different color in there. I'll double check that real fast. I've got the brush activated. I'll go to the eyedropper, and I'll make sure I drop it on that brown. And yeah, I did have a slightly different color in there for some reason. And I'll come back and I'll do that, and notice nothing happens. And that's because what you want to do is, I'm going to go ahead and clear this layer. Clear that layer. What I want to do is go back on now. I need to go back and select this. These are the little things that happen in Procreate. Now I'm going to go back up to that layer that we created above it, and I'm going to turn it into a multiply blending mode, okay? So I tap on this little letter here. It's normally in normal, and then I scroll down to multiply blending mode, and that's going to make whatever color I put on top be amplified by the exact amount that how much of that a darker color is underneath that. That's a poor explanation, but I want to keep moving with y'all. So I'll go back to that flowing hair brush, and I'll do a test and see how big it is. I'll come across here, and that's not bad. Okay, so I'm gonna come across. This looks a little more like maybe a 1930s painted fake wood grain, and maybe I'll make it so that this one has wood grain. And really play with this. Okay, you can adjust the size here. You can adjust the opacity here so it doesn't become quite so grabby, okay? And I'm just going to, notice I'm going over it a couple of times, and then I can go into the eraser if I need to, and I like a flat marker eraser, and I can clean up if I need to. But remember, we're working fast, so I'm not really going to worry about that. I wanted to show you that as an option. I'll go back to the flowing hair brush, and let's finish this out. And this isn't the most beautiful job in wood grain that I've ever done, but I think it's really instructive to show you all just how quick you can be. And notice that I'm changing direction on this. I believe that you call it a style, or it might be a rail. And in a perfect world, I'd probably mask off so that I ended at just the right place. But I'm just going to be kind of loose about it, kind of suggestive about it. I'll do the same thing here. And the brush isn't perfect. You notice that it's thicker in some parts of the brush stroke than others. And again, just play with that. I'm not pressing very hard. So you're really going to develop a feel for this. And let's say that's good enough. And then all I have left is these middle drawers, and there you can see that gap that just forms. I'm not sure why. I'll come through here, And there are other ways to make wood grain, but this is a pretty fast one. All right. And you can also give it a little wiggle every once in a while, just to give it some complexity. Okay, and then I missed a spot here, and then I'll finish these off vertically because I'll make the grain parallel to their orientation. All right, and all of you will do a better job with this than I'm doing, but that's the beauty of Procreate. We can all personalize it. All right, so that's good enough for my wood grain. I'll turn off the selection button now so we can see how that turned out. And I'm not going to get fussy. I'm not going to put wood grain over the lighter color just because I want to show you the basics. But by all means, everybody go have some fun and do that. So we're at a point where we've sort of finished the cabinet. It's still very basic looking, but we're going to do some tricks. Make sure you stay right to the end because we're going to do some tricks to make that even punchier, okay? It's all about that lighting study at the end. So now I want to add a few drawing details. So I'll go back up to the drawing itself. I will add a layer above that. And first I'm going to start with a black outline. I'm going to select a black from up here. And I'm going to go back to my technical pen, which is sort of my pencil really. It's like a felt tip marker. And you can find that in the inking section, by the way, but I'm going to select that technical pen. And over here, I'm just going to do these quick lines, and they're going to be either exactly horizontal or exactly vertical. So I'm going to pop in for a moment to the canvas section and take advantage of Procreate's drawing guide, okay? And that's going to limit my lines to vertical and horizontal. It's also going to produce this grid, but I'm going to ignore that grid, and it's going to go away later. I go back to the layer that I want to make this outline in, and I am going to find Drawing Assist, and I'm going to activate Drawing Assist, and that's what tells Procreate, in this layer, only make horizontal and vertical lines. So I've done that. I go back to my technical pen, and I check the size, and that looks okay. And then I'm just going to drag this around. And this really kind of elevates a sketch. It's a little less modern, I suppose, a little more traditional, but I think this sideboard seems kind of traditional at this point. And now what I'm going to do is do a really down and dirty version of those two little tall lamps. Maybe I'll just, this is where some of you will really shine, okay? I only need to do one because I'm going to transfer it when I'm done. And I'm going to do a kind of a sloppy job. It's going to be a tall and elegant thing, but I'll come in here and let's say I'm going to put the shade up about that high, okay? And so now I'll go back and I'm still in that layer, but I'm going to turn Drawing Assist off, and I'll show you why, because I want to be able to draw now at an angle. So I'm going to finish the bottom of this lamp, and notice that what I did, even though I don't have Drawing Assist, I pulled that line across and then just held it. And that makes the line straighten out, and then I can make it parallel if I want to. Okay, so that's what I did on the bottom. Now I'm going to come up here, same thing, and make these kind of, I'm not sure what kind of a lamp this is. I think I've seen these around somewhere. Sort of an elegant, somewhat traditional lamp. Okay, and that's my lamp. And I accidentally put it on the same layer as the outline. So what I'll do is a quick selection, rectangular, a quick grab, and I want to put it on its own layer. So I'm going to do the 3-finger swipe again, and I'm going to go to cut and paste, and now it's on its own layer. And why that's important is because now I'm going to swipe right to left on this and duplicate that layer. Now I'm going to activate the Move and Transform tool, and I'm going to bring that second lamp over, okay? And I'll give it the same relationship to this vertical of the cabinet as the other one had, and I'll tap. So that's great, and let me do one more trick here. I also want to add a painting. So this is going to be a little different. I'm going to use the Selection tool. Since that painting is going to be rectangular, and I don't quite know the proportions I want yet. I'm going to start with the color and then add the detail to it, then add the line work to it. So I'll go to maybe an off-white this time, and I'll go back to the rectangular selection tool. And I'm taking a chance here. I don't really know how big I want this. So here's where your design sensibility comes in. But that looks, I'll make it a little smaller. And let's say it's right about there. I'll grab this white dot and drag it and drop it in. And there's that painting on its own layer. And it's not quite symmetrical, so I'll go ahead and tap the Move and Transform tool. And since it's the only thing on its layer, the entire painting is grabbed. And I'm just going to even it out by eye in between those two lights. Okay, maybe I'll raise it a little higher. So that's that. And again, I want to work fast, so I'm going to, I really should do a line drawing over that. So let me go up and add a layer. And I think this will pay off in the end. So I'll go back to Drawing Assist. Okay. I'll go back to my black, and I'm just going to hold this dot back so it goes to the color I used before. I'll go back to my technical pen, and I'm just going to add a quick frame, some quick line work around this so-called painting, okay? And now I'm going to estimate where the frame is, and it's useful for me. I'm glad that grid is there, because that grid is helping me draw fast, okay? And I could add the tiniest little extra detail in there if I wanted to, just to show off a little bit, okay? So that's good, but that's not really a painting yet. Let's do one other thing. I want to get reoriented, figure out where I am in the layers. Now I'm going to go back to this white layer, because I'm going to add just a random image above that white layer, and you'll see why in a moment. So let's go back to the wrench menu. Go ahead and highlight the white layer, because whatever we import will come in one layer above what we've got activated. So I'll go back to the wrench menu, the actions menu. I'll go to Add. I'll go to Insert a File, which takes me to my iCloud drive. Now I just got some random things in here, and I'm got my fingers crossed and hoping that something will be cool. So here's the what I call the UCLA Usonian plan that we did for another project in class. And I've got that, and I want to fit it to this painting, but I also don't want to mess around and like take too much time. So I'm going to go, instead of this uniform transformation mode, I'm going to go to freeform, and I'm just going to grab the corners of this painting and stretch them right out, because nobody will know the actual proportions of that plan, and that looks good. That's one of we've all seen that look that somebody will have in their elegant room. They'll have an architectural floor plan. Okay, so we've got some basics. Let's add a color around that painting, and let's go back, because we want it to coordinate with the credenza, with the sideboard. So I'll go back into that layer. I will sample the color of that layer again, because I've lost track of it. There is hiding behind my layer menu. Here's that. That color is now sampled. And what I want to do is, as it turns out, I'm just going to drag, well, let's see, what are we going to do? Yeah, I guess I'm going to abide by my own rules and go back to the selection tool, rectangle, and drag it and drop that across that frame, drag and drop that color in. Let's see what something's going on. Oh, I know what's going on. Remember how we created that initial rectangle for the painting? Well, that color we just added is under that. So I'll turn off that initial white rectangle we made to help us estimate the size of the painting. And there's that color all by itself back with the credenza color. So I'll go ahead and delete. I'll go right to left swipe and delete that white rectangle. We no longer need it, that off-white rectangle. And let's see where we are now. I'll turn that off. So it's building up. Don't forget, this is an imaginary setting, but it's just something that's consistent with the kind of very elegant design of Pablo's piece of furniture here. So one more thing is conspicuously missing, a color behind these lamps. And remember, we put all of our colors behind these line drawings. So again, to save time, I'm going to go ahead and actually make these. Well, let me keep these lamps on separate layers because you may change them. You may change the proportions. Just to show you again how cool that is, I'll select one of the lamps. I'll go to the Move and Transform tool, and I'll be in freeform. So if you didn't like that lamp, you could just quickly adjust it like this. And in some ways, that's kind of nicer. Okay. So I'll do that. And what I'll do now is I'll show off and just delete the first one, okay? And then duplicate this and move it over. So there again, an example of the kind of magic of Procreate for helping you design, okay? So let's go now. I want to put some quick color behind that. So I'll go down, I'll make sure I'm back in the family of colors. And I'm going to put a new layer on top of that. And I'm going to pick like a silvery gray that might be an aluminum or a chrome or something once it's spiffed up. And I'm going to use the same thing. There's that color. I'll go to the selection tool. I'll go to rectangle, and I'm just going to grab these rectangles here, pull that down, and pull that across. And I'm going to fill. And there that is in there. And I'll do the same thing what we did before. I'll copy that. You can barely see it, but I'll copy that, duplicate it, and I'll bring it back over here to go under the other one. And I think I've missed part of the lamp, but let's just keep going. Now I also want to, I'll go ahead and merge those together. And I do want to make up for that, and I do want to actually make sure I've got the rest of this lamp filled in. So I'll go back to, I'll stay in rectangular mode. And I'll grab that, and I'll grab this one so I don't have to duplicate anything anymore. And this time I'll use fill layer to make sure it's in there. And it's hard to see the difference now, but later on it'll pop out, okay? And the last thing I'll do is I want to add a layer for these lamp shades. And I want to do a very, very light yellow, which I don't necessarily have. So let me go into the disk, and I'll bring the hue indicator over to a kind of a warm yellow, and a very, very light version of that warm yellow. And just it's an off-white really that's got some yellow in it. You can see that. So I've got a new layer picked. I'll go back to the freehand selection tool, and I'll pop around these two shades. And remember, because they're on the same layer, I can adjust that color easily later on. Such a huge advantage over the watercolors that I used to do. And now I'll go to fill. And you can see there's that nice warm glow there, okay? So that's step one. Fantastic. You'd be fine, I think, going with that, but I want to really take you to the next level and show you this wonderful magic trick where you can make a lighting study out of this. So to do that, what was I going to do? Okay, start again. First, I am going to turn off this grid. So I'll go back to the Actions menu and to Canvas header, the Canvas tab, where the drawing guide occurs. Now I'm going to simply disengage that drawing guide. That doesn't mean the ability to do straight lines is gone. It just means that the grid is gone. It's a little confusing, but the grid is gone. And now I'm going to go all the way to the top, but still under the drawings, okay? I'm going to go all the way to the top of the color portion. I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to fill this with what I call the twilight layer. So I want you to go into your color palette and find what I call a violet gray, a gray violet. The gray part is to make it darker, what we're going to do, and the violet part is to contrast with the warm colors in here. So I'll pick this one. Again, again, we can always change it later, but there it is, all loaded and ready to go. Now I'm going to go back to that layer, and remember what we said about multiply. Multiply allows things to come through that otherwise would not come through. So if I filled this right now with that gray violet, just to make the point, pretty much the whole thing would go away. We're still below the drawings, remember? So, and there's that solo painting up there, but that's not what we wanted. So I'm going to undo that with a 2-finger tap. And actually, I'm going to move this. I want that painting to be down below. The painting is almost like a color in this thing. So I want the twilight to go over everything but the line drawings. So here we go. We're back in our layer, and this time I'm going to pre-arrange so that that layer is in multiply mode. And now when I pull this gray violet down, I'll tap out first of all so you can see the whole thing. Now when I pull this gray violet down, it fills up the whole canvas. And you can begin to get a feeling for where this is going, that we've just darkened it. I'll do a 2-finger tap to go back to where it was, 3-finger tap to come forward to where it was. And that's the sort of level of darkness that we're going to be working with, okay? Now my studio is a little bit dark right now, and the camera keeps adjusting to that, so I'm going to make it even darker just to make the point, okay? And maybe even a little more saturated here. So again, the power of these wonderful tools over here. And also I want to bring that white frame back, okay? So while I'm in that twilight layer that has now filled up the whole thing, I'm going to go back to the rectangular selection tool and use that as a shortcut to get rid of the part of this gray violet that I don't want, okay? So I'll just drag it across, just like I'm using a huge fat eraser, and I'll drag it across. And when I get to this point, I'll do the 3-finger swipe and do cut, and now you can see it, okay? So that's the beginning of our lighting study. Now, to do a lighting study, what you want to do is we're going to combine the eraser, and I'll show you. We're going to go to the eraser and use one of the soft airbrush erasers. And if you don't have my drawing set or brush set, you can come down here to airbrush and just randomly grab, I think what they call the soft brush, okay? And so, in effect, what we're going to be doing is erasing away from this layer. And you can see, again, I'm doing it in a kind of a clumsy way. I'll make the eraser bigger. But you can see the effect we're going after, okay? Where the lights are glowing, and it's going to make everything very dramatic, very sexy. But there's a little twist ahead of time. I don't want to like take a lot of time to carefully go over each of these things and make sure they have just the right amount of light. So if you wanted to, we're not going to do it in this time to save space, but I'm going to go back with 2 fingers to the point where that's solid. And if you prefer, you can come into here and use your rectangular selection and just grab the whole painting and remove the section of twilight that's over that painting. And watch what happens when I do. Cut and paste. Now, when you do that, it automatically goes back to normal mode. And you would have to change that to multiply, okay? And then you would want to adjust it. So it's still, if I take it completely away and it's completely transparent, there it is. It's just screaming on the page. But you can do some degree of adjustment and make it feel to you as if it's being illuminated, but it's not completely dark and gloomy inside of that other thing, okay? So I just wanted to show you that. And by the way, that you can still, if you're, let's say you're at 60%, you can still come in here with the eraser and give it sort of an accent right in the middle. Even though the rest of it is significantly lighter, remember that here's that layer. It's still lighter than this layer because we adjusted the transparency, right? but it also gives a little bit more precision to your drawing. But this was going to be all about speed, remember? So I want to fulfill my promise to you. I'm going to go back, watch what happens in the layers when I two-finger tap. I'm going to go all the way back to the place where we popped it out of the twilight layer. And I'm just going to go back to the twilight layer. I'm going to undo the selection, and we're going to work with what we have, okay, which is still pretty cool. So I'll go back into my eraser, and now remember I'm in that brand new twilight layer. I'm going to go back in, grab that eraser, and I am going to do exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. And I am going to just gently bring that transparency or scrub out some of that twilight layer. And I'm going to do a little harder here where the lamp itself is glowing. And you can adjust this. You know, this lamp would have a sizable glow against the wall, so we may as well go there. And notice that very slight yellow, white, that warm white we talked about, how that's kind of working. It's warmer than that, and it's kind of working there. And you can even go way down in the size of this, and let's say you wanted to really have a little hot spot almost where the bulb was, okay? So all kinds of interesting things are possible as you develop your skills with this, right? And I can also go even further down and make these wonderful accents. Like I can make it so the top of the lamp is the brightest, which of course it would be in reality. And I can also put a highlight down here. I'll make it even smaller. I can put a highlight down here and make that really look like it's chrome or whatever technique you want. Even put a little shiny thing in there, like it's reflecting something way back in the room. And if I wanted to, I could even come in here and turn that into like a polished brass frame. So I really want, don't forget, you can just pull and release too, and even that will become a straight line. Your eraser will become a straight line. So I really want you to play with this and discover all the cool things that you can do. And Pablo, I know you're going to have a ball with this. So I'll take the eraser back up, and now I want to just make this since this really is the focus of what we're doing. I want to make Pablo's beautiful work a little more prominent here. I'll keep it sort of dark down here, and I'll just sort of add a little bit of zip to that. And I think I'll have these lights glow a bit more because we're going to do one last thing that really pops this out, okay? And that is that we're actually going to add, I'm going to take a little bit more of this painting away, okay? Because I want it to seem like this painting is glowing from a light above, okay? And we're going to do one more trick to this. So take a breath, everyone. And we're going to go all the way back down to the bottom of our layers. And we are going to add drop shadows behind this painting and behind this cabinet, okay? The lights themselves would not have a shadow because they are the source of lights. But there's a real fast way to do this, and I'll show you that in a second. So here's the painting and the cabinet layer, remember? And we're going back here because we're gonna go for speed. And I am actually going to isolate this rectangle, the rectangle that we made for the painting and the rectangle we made for the cabinet. And I'll show you why in a moment. So I'll go to my selection. I'll pull my rectangular selection over that. And this time, remember, I'm in that layer of the painting background and the layer of the cabinet background. This time, when I do that selection, rectangle selection, just drag and drop, I'm going to go to copy and paste because I want to make a new copy of that layer. And there it is. That's the layer. Now you don't see it because it's directly in line with that. But I'm going to go back to my gray violet, okay? And I am going to select this layer. All right, and notice that the marching ants have focused around that rectangle because that layer is back inside there. And now I'm going to go to fill layer, all right? And now, since this is my shadow layer, I'm going to drag it down below the base painting layer. And now I'm going to make it roughly the size that that shadow would be. So I'll go back to freeform, and watch closely as I do this. You're going to see it pop out from behind the painting, okay? And I'm going to move it so that, and I'm just eyeballing this, and my plan here is to make it look like the light bulb here is shining rays of light down, hitting this corner, and then that corner ends up down here somewhere, okay? And the same over here. That corner is going to be inside of this line, and it's also going to project up a little bit. And I don't want it to be too spooky, but I want to go at least that far. And I'm going to tap out. That's there. And I'll show you that, make this come to fruition now. Now remember, when you copy and paste something out, it goes back to normal blending mode, meaning it's opaque back there, okay? So I want to change that because I want it to pick up the wall color behind. So I'm going to tap in the blending mode, and I'm going to drag down to multiply, and notice how it got darker, okay? As I move this, let's do that again. As I move the blending mode back to normal, watch how this changes and then suddenly becomes just that good old regular gray violet. So I'll go back to, and watch what happens. I'll go back to multiply. Oops. I'll go back to multiply, and there it is, even darker. Now I'm going to make it probably a little darker still, but I'll hold off on that in a second, because I want to do the same thing with the cabinet. So this will be faster. I don't have to explain every step. I'll go back to the cabinet background layer. I'll select it with a rectangle. I'll copy and paste, okay? Now this time I'm going to enlarge it first, so I'll bring it back, let's see, bring it back below the background cabinet layer. But let's go directly to the enlargement process. We'll go to transform, move and transform. First I'll make it uniformly bigger by dragging it up, and then I'm going to make it also wider, okay, because we want it to go beyond the sides of the cabinet, even though it might not be the actual physics of this shadow. We want it to go beyond the side because we want to see these beautiful profiles that Pablo has added. And I'll bring that back down a little bit. And again, it's just pure eyeballing, okay? I'm looking at the bulb here. I'm drawing an imaginary line down, and I'm hitting about there. So I'm gonna go with that. And now we're gonna do that same thing. Remember, it's still in normal blending mode, but that means that I can directly drag the gray violet down into it and release. And there's that. It's now turned to the gray violet. And then I do that last step, and I switch to multiply blending mode, okay? Now that's looking pretty sharp. I'm going to clean it up with the rectangular selection tool down here, and that's going to let me get rid of the part that's coming below the imaginary frame of the drawing. I do a 3-finger swipe, and I hit cut, and it goes away. Now that just looks a little too slick to me, so I'm going to show you one last move, and I'm going to merge this layer, the two shadows, the cabinet and the painting. I'm going to merge them together, again using my strategy so that things are as simple as possible. And now I'm going to go into the adjustments menu to our old friend Gaussian blur. And for those that you don't know, Gaussian blur is like it sort of atomizes and turns a thing into mist at the edges, okay? And I'm doing that because I want to soften. Let's look at these two corners. They're a little unrealistic. No, they would never be that sharp. And again, I've got it up here. Let me reselect Gaussian blur so you know how to do it from the scratch. I select it, I activate it, and now it's similar to these other things where I tap the pencil down and then just immediately move it left or right. And when I move it to the right, it creates different percentages of Gaussian blur, okay? So you can see it falls apart pretty quickly, but I still want it to be somewhat recognizable. I want to really feature this nice detail that Pablo's put in. So I'm going to go with that at that point. Okay, and there you go. I've got my very much more special, slightly groovy version of that original base drawing. And if I wanted to go back to the original base drawing, I can just tap and hold on this layer, and we can go back and forth and see the contrast. So here we go. That's what we started with. And I'll tap and hold again, and everything comes back. And I'll make this drawing available too. I made the line drawing available, but I'll also make this JPEG available at the link in the description below. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to my mug, as they say, and just say thank you everybody for checking this out, and check the links in the description below. Reach out, and by the way, I'm opening this up to other people that would like to have their work critiqued like this, because I love to do it, and I think people get a lot out of it. So it's been fun, and don't forget to check out either this video or this video as your next possible source of inspiration. And we'll see you later.